of the diseases that we are concerned about in almonds during bloom time and springtime, and some of management strategies. When I talk about disease and the management, I'd like to begin with this disease triangle. This is the basis of calls and whys that we do in disease management. For a disease to develop, we need three things. One is susceptible host, and there is a pathogen, and the third one is a conducive environment. So when we are talking about almonds in this case, we have a susceptible host already in there. And particularly during the bloom time, the flowers, blossoms, they are particularly highly susceptible to the pathogens. So we get a susceptible host, particularly in this time of the year or throughout the season. And then most of the pathogens, they are around in nature or on the trees already. But for them to be active and cause the disease, we need a conducive environment. And coincidentally, we have the rains that create the conducive environments, and the rainy period comes at this time. So we have this triangle complete that leads to the disease. So, like I said, trees are susceptible to many fungi, blossoms are highly susceptible, and the rainy conditions favor these diseases, and we get rain during the bloom period. So this all. We apply fungicides during the bloom, usually to protect blossoms from becoming infected. But there are a couple of things that we need to keep in mind, and one of them is the avoiding building up a resistance to fungicides in all fungus species. I will talk about this in the later part of my talk. First, I would like to give an overview of the bloom time and early spring diseases. We mainly, during the bloom time, we mainly talk about brown rot, blossom blight, short hole, the jagged rot, and the other diseases that come later in the season during the springtime. There's scab, rust, and anthracnose. Brown rot blossom blight, this is the major disease of concern during this time of the year. This is a disease that's almost always sprayed for at least once during the bloom time. This disease infects anthers and pistils and moves into and kills spurs, and also can move into shoots and kills the shoots. The young fruits are also very susceptible. All varieties are susceptible to this disease, but Butte and Carmel, they are the most susceptible ones. And in almonds, stigmas, anthers, petals, they are all parts of the flower. They're very susceptible. So this disease can spread right from the pink bud stage to the petal fall. So that's why during the bloom, we focus on spraying the almonds at least once throughout the bloom period. So here are some picture of some asexual spores. They're called conidia, and these spores they spread the disease further. So most fungicides are targeted to control these spores. The fungus also survives in twig cankers, and it remains on the diseased flower parts and spurs. Like I said, like many other pathogens, this fungus also survives throughout the seasons on the almond trees. But at this time of the year, we complete the picture by completing the third angle of the triangle, the rainy period, like the conducive environment. For example, Butte is a highly susceptible variety, and this was a picture taken by one of our fellow farmer advisors, and this was a typical dry year with no rains, but still this orchard had about 50% incidence of disease, even when no rain was. And why is that? Because early morning dew, the fog events, and then the sprinkler, the wetness, canopy wetness from the irrigation, they all can create the conducive environment, the required wetness of the moisture in the canopy. So in a susceptible variety like this, we want to make sure we do some preemptive sprays during the bloom time. There are the fungicides for brown rot. I will discuss the UC publication from 2013 about the selection of fungicides and how to manage fungicide resistance in the slides that will come later. So this chart is taken from that publication. You can refer to that publication from time to time. So fungicides are listed by their mode of action in the central column. To avoid developing fungicide resistance, we need to make sure that, excuse me, do you have a pointer?
Yeah, should be one right here.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I was looking, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you had to be two-handed here.
So we need to make sure that mode of action number 1, 4, 9, 11, and 17, fungicides with those mode of actions, we need to make sure that no more than one application in succession should be made before getting to a different mode of action, those number. So in the brown rot management, traditionally we go with a 2-spray program in a typical year, but the prolonged wet weather, if it rains throughout the bloom period, we spray every 7 to 10 days. The sprays, 2-spray program, the sprays are usually made, one at pink bud stage and other at full bloom. If you spray at 20%, 10 to 20% bloom, you can come back at petal fall, and that's how we spread those. But then if it rains throughout and we have a prolonged wet weather, we spray every 7 to 10 days, and that's because the fungicide persistence period is about 2 weeks, and if it rains and the rains interrupt that fungicide application, we need to come back every 7 to 10 days. And I think this is in the exceptionally wet years. If it doesn't rain through the bloom period from start of bloom until the petal fall, if it remains dry, we usually advise, in particularly non-pearl Monterey varieties, so we usually advise to there is no need to spray, or we can just do with one single spray at 80% to full bloom and go. Strobilurins mode of action, these have a little bit of curative effect, so this means that it can compensate 3 or 4 days delay. Even when the infection occurs, these fungicides, they move into the leaves, and they can have a little bit of a curative effect. So if you miss a preemptive spray and have the infection, you can still come in within that period.
On your non-Perel Monterey's, what if it's foggy conditions? Are they susceptible to brown rot?
Yes, all varieties are susceptible, but like I said, Butte is one of those.
Right, but when you say no spray for non-Perel or Monterey, that's...
Yeah, we typically advise when if it's a no rain period, it's dry, we usually look and
no rain, but also dry.
Yeah.
Dry moisture-wise, as far as
Dry.
Today's not a good example of that with the fog. Of a dry day.
Yeah, Gurreet, it's leaf wetness. You're right on the wetness. So yeah, consider fog as
Is leaf wetness, heavy dew, all that?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, and you got to think extended periods of leaf wetness. So 20, 30 minutes is different than 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours.
Right. Okay.
So the next disease I'm discussing is the green fruit or jacket rot. It's caused by 3 different fungi. The time of infection comes a little later during the bloom, later parts of the bloom. And it is typically occurs in senescing petals and anthers. Cultivars that form tight clusters like Butte and Carmel, they are the most susceptible. How the disease spreads, the water-soaked brown spots, they affect the senescing petals or flower jackets, and then these flower jackets wither and stick to nut. Or it can also infect the anthers and then move through solar tubes to the flower jackets, and basically the flower jackets wither and stick to the nut. And in the tight clusters, these petals can fall on other developing nuts or senescing petals and infect those further. So as the nut grows, we have a brown spot. This was clear in the previous picture. And this is how the disease develops. Demethylation inhibitors such as Laredo and Orbit are not effective against Botrytis cinerea, one of the causal organisms. So we need to select for this disease. We need to select fungicides which are effective against all 3 of them. Almond shock hole. This is again a disease that comes in from petal fall to onwards to through the spring. We have the spots on leaves, fruits, twigs, and flowers. Spots on young leaves, they're purplish. Fruits on young leaves, they fall out and make a hole, which is typical characteristic symptom of this disease, and that's why it's called short hole, because they leave a typical round hole. On the fruits, we may see purplish margin and with a little bit raised lesions, and heavy infection can also cause fruit drop or gummy as well. So these are typical symptoms of short hole. These lesions will dry out and fall and leave these holes. This is a typical symptom. The short hole fungus survives in the infected twigs and spores. This is one of those diseases that we can avoid in the next season by reducing the inoculum in late fall. So the next slide will discuss the management for short hole. For short hole lesions, we monitor the orchards in late fall, and we see if there is any incidence. Typically in the fall, first rains after harvest, first rains in fall, we see the fruiting structures of this fungus developing, and if we see those fruiting structures, we can apply zinc sulfate in late October to early November to hasten the leaf fall, and that way we can reduce the inoculum to prevent the buildup of disease in the next season. So otherwise, this disease can overwinter on the trees and be a problem. So these are the list of fungicides, pretty much the same mode of action growth, same kind of fungicides, but the timing is different. It comes from petal fall until 2 to 5 weeks after bloom. Then there is anthracnose. It can infect nuts and it can cause profuse gumming. And these symptoms typically appear after petal fall. So this kind of profuse gumming and sunken orange lesions, they are typical symptoms of anthracnose. And this disease can also progress to kernel. If we cut this nut, we can see developing spores. So anthracnose can also infect the spurs and cause limb dieback. The leaves also have marginal necrosis, and the leaves die typically, but they remain attached to the branches. These are the fungicides for anthracnose. They can be used from bloom up to summer if there is a prolonged wet period and we see incidence of this disease. Almond scab is another disease that we could manage through monitoring during the winter period. In here we have the oil-like soft spots on the developing nuts, and on the leaves, if we hold the leaf to the light, we can see small light specks. So these are typical symptoms. The fungus this survives in twig lesions, and the spores are spread by wind or rain. We can do dormant spur sampling to see if we have the incidence of scab, and probably do a dormant spray and avoid spraying fungicides during the bloom period. It can cause severe defoliation, and it can occur successfully in several years. So we need to take care of this disease throughout the season, keep watching even during the dormant period. So in the scab control, typically we have divided into two sections: no history of disease versus history of disease. If you have no history, you can make an application a couple of weeks after petal fall using the same DMI or strobilurin fungicide. If you have a history of disease, we would suggest a dormant application of copperin oil or chlorothalonil, and then follow the spray program in the Bloomtime or summer spring time under this. So this is a list of fungicides for that. So almond rust. This occurs sporadically. This goes into spring and summer. This is typically seen in orchards, around canals or waterways, and it can become serious in almonds if it's not been addressed. In rust, this is the upper side of the leaves. Small yellow specks appear on the upper side. On the lower side, rust-colored specks appear, and these lesions they spread with seeds further. In the orchard with history of rust, we can apply fungicide in late spring and summer. typically 5 weeks after petal fall and forward. 2 to 3 application may be needed that have severe rust problems. To be effective, fungicide must be applied before rust symptoms are visible. So you need to keep an eye on this disease, which is vulnerable to spreading. Micronite circle can work as well, but be careful you're not supplying it with oil supply. This rust is another disease that can be stopped from spreading by reducing the inoculum, just like we did for shot hole. Look in the orchard in the fall, late fall timing, and if you see inoculum, you can apply zinc sulfate to hasten the leaf fall and reduce the inoculum. These are the fungicides for rust. They come typically 5 weeks after petal fall onward. So now the disease control strategies. Disease control typically depends on these basic things: the type of fungicide used, and the timing of the spray, and effective coverage. So the effective coverage is up to the grower to decide to have the efficient and maximum coverage. But for the timing, you need to educate yourself on these kind of symptoms and see if whether or not they're coming and when they start. And then educate yourself on the type of fungicides and the mode of actions. I will get to that slide in a minute. So you need to assess which diseases are present and select the right kind of fungicide. And the rotation of fungicides is very important to reduce the resistance development. So typically a bloom spray, like I discussed earlier, is between 5 to 20% bloom and 1 at 50% to full bloom. Persistent rain conditions may require without any challenge of time. So we've developed this kind of strategies that rotate chemistries to avoid resistance buildup. We need to use only label rates. This again goes back to reducing fungicide resistance development and reducing the effectiveness over time. And then we need to limit the use of single-site fungicides, like I mentioned, certain group numbers, mode of action group numbers that we use to limit their application not more than once before going on to the other. And then educate yourself on these fungicides and diseases and symptoms so that we can select the right fungicide for the right disease. And then you can start your spray program with a robust but low resistant risk fungicide. So, like I said, for the last 50 years, fungicide resistance has been a problem, and it coincides with the increasing use of fungicides. So they go together, and we need to employ methods to reduce fungicide resistance. This is the publication that UC comes up with. The latest one is 2013. This enlists all fungicides and other bactericides or drugs. For in this case, you can find almond in here. And this is a fungicide resistance action committee that has been working for long to avoid resistance management. And this is a table that I picked up from the same publication. It lists all the fungicide and their efficacy against all these diseases. So this is updated in 2013. And then there is another table discussing treatment timings for these diseases and their effectiveness. So then, in the last, I would talk about a new disease that has been observed recently in the San Joaquin Valley. It's bacterial spot. It's caused by a bacterium. It's different from the causal organism in the other diseases was fungus. This disease have earlier been reported in Australia, and particularly Fritz variety is very susceptible. Last season, some orchards in Merced and Stanislaus counties, they reported this disease. They reported having these kind of gum balls, the amber-colored gum oozing out of the Fritz, particularly Fritz variety. And then a couple of farmer advisors got together and they had a field day as well. So this disease has been very serious in Australia, and in there, the Fritz variety was almost knocked out of cultivation because of this variety. So there are a couple of things that we can, if we see this amber-colored gumming, this is quite different from the other symptoms that we see with the leaf-footed bug. So sometimes these symptoms can be confused with leaf-footed bug damage. In that case, in the bug damage case, we see a clear gum, but in bacterial spot, we see the amber colored gum. And then in leaf-footed bug damage, if we cut cut through the hull, you can see the insect damage, insect penetrated through the shell. But in this case, you won't see those kind of things. And then these can be also confused with anthracnose that I discussed in earlier slides. And in anthracnose, we can see fungal spores, pinkish or orange fungal spores developing inside. And anthracnose can also lead to shoot death or spore death because it can also move to shoots. But we haven't seen those symptoms in case of bacterial spore. Right now, we are trying to work on the management strategies for our particular conditions, but we can recommend that we can control this disease for the next season by reducing inoculum, by spraying zinc sulfate in late fall, and this strategy has been shown to be working in several cases. And then mummy nuts can also be a source of inoculum for the next season. And then if you see these kind of symptoms, please notify your UC farm advisor so that we can work further on that. And in the last section, I would just stress on these things. Preventing disease pressure comes out to 1, 2, and 3. Use of fungicides in culture control and monitoring in the fall. So I will not suggest going with just one strategy, but a holistic picture. Culture control, like in several diseases, we can avoid developing the diseases. It comes through canopy wetness and the irrigation. We can do irrigation management in an effective way, particularly when we talk about the summer or the during harvest, pre-harvest diseases, we can effectively reduce them by proper irrigation management. And then fall foliage, like I discussed the case of rust and shot roll, we can reduce the inoculum by hastening the leaf fall during the fall. And we can also reduce the neckworm by pruning the dead wood and removing the debris. Then monitoring is very important during the fall. We can monitor rust and shot hole up to the fall rains, and then during the dormant season, we can monitor for the scab and do this dormant spur sampling. That will give us a good idea if scab is developing in our orchard, and we can, because the dormant season, if we find these kind of symptoms, it's much more easier to treat those symptoms during the dormant season than bringing them into the season and trying to apply fungicides. These are the fungicides that we can consider at various timing. We are right here at bloom. 80% of full bloom. These are fungicides that were picked up from that UC publication. You can refer to that. And 2 to 5 weeks, they are typically a similar fungicide, but the timing differs in most cases. And then the other consideration is the bee activity. Bees are active from morning until late afternoon, so we need to be careful about spraying. And we usually recommend spraying after in the evenings or until night. When the bee activity is reduced. And then some fungicides may also harm beehive health, and we need to educate us. You can refer to UC IPM. A couple of UC researchers have laid great stress on the effect of fungicides on bee health. And then avoiding tank mixes, because at this time of the year we are particularly concerned about avoiding these fungus or these diseases from spreading and affecting our tree yield. So we should be focused rather than going with other nutrients or other tank mixes, because the more the diluted sprays that we are applying, and the more of the chances of reducing the efficacy of the fungicides that we apply. And then the last thing is don't go for an overkill. We need to apply only those timing or only those fungicides that we really need, that are really necessary. Because number one, we need to apply these fungicides because we want to save our crop, but we also want to save our bees, which will in fact save the crop, and we also want to save the environment, which will save us. So these are little considerations that I would note. And here are some UC resources, UC IPM website, Almond Doctor blog that David Dahl started a couple of years ago, and then the website of BRAC to know more about different services. Yeah, thank you. you.
Thank you, Gurreet. If folks have questions, feel free. We've got a little bit of time to, I guess. There's lots happening here.
Do you have any information yet on independence and where it is susceptibility-wise to any of the diseases?
No, I guess we don't have evaluation data for independence.
Yeah, no, so
Sorry.
the only thing I can add to that is in 2010, when we had that wet year, we had a relatively mature planting. It was in its 9th leaf at the time in Merced, and I walked that thing a lot trying to look for diseases, and the guy followed a pretty traditional bloom spray program. I didn't see anything that really stood out. And what I mean standing out, like Fritz with bacterial spot, or Monterey with anthracnose, or brown rot on butte, or something like that. So nothing really flagged me as saying, no, this is going to be a problematic variety of this.
Which fungicide do you guys consider robust to start with?
What do you think, Gurreet?
I will go through that. I don't have any top in mind, but any low risk, low resistance risk fungicides that I don't, I'm not coming up with any name. but-
And I think you have the right point in mind. Focus on what's good at brown rot and these Bloomtime diseases. So you can rotate into something that's a little bit stronger chemistry. And I generally look towards, I used to always kind of recommend Rovrol, but that has kind of had some questions on bee activity. So if I were to do an early pink bud spray, I'd probably be looking more towards Rovrol. Probably when I moved into full bloom, I saw this guy who was considering Captan and Topsomen as a tank mix application. You probably could go with a single mode of action strobilurin. If you go with the DMI, like a bumper or a tilt, because it's cheap, you have to make sure that if you have extended periods of rain, that you cover yourself with jacket rod. So you're going to come back in with something in petal fall to control jacket rod.
How about Vanguard or
And-
Quadras?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, that's a good point. So Vanguard is another one of those kind of early season that has a pretty good activity at that bloom time. So yeah, Vanguard's another good product. Quadras Top is a combination of strobilurin and DMI. I consider that thing, and the same thing with like Pristine, or Luna Sensation, these tank mix, pre-mix fungicides. I question using those at bloom because I think all our chemistries are evaluated for brown rot, and just about every one of them works on brown rot. But that Quadras Top, that is a silver bullet, and it can be really effective for in-season management or that 2 to 5 weeks post-petal fall management for scab and rust. So I generally like to push that one a little bit later, or use something to break up that rotation. So if you use Quadras Top and come in with something complete different mode of action, since it's strobilurin and a DMI, that really leaves you looking for some things to apply it to, 2 weeks, and maybe come back in with the strobilurin later. So to give that as an idea, you could potentially go, let's say you want to put Quadras Top on, or any strobilurin on at full bloom, or Pristine, for example. You can come back in at maybe petal fall, or slightly after petal fall, chlorothalonil, and then come back in. And since you rotate it away, you can then come back in with another strobilurin or a DMI in that 2 to 5 weeks post-petal fall, if you're trying to control scab and rust and those types of problems.
One thing I would say about Pristine, I also do bees. If you spray Pristine at full bloom, them bees are going to take until June to recover. It doesn't kill the adult bee, but it kills the brood.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm gonna, this is, where I think we're kind of hitting the tip of the iceberg with this bee. To be on, it sounds so punny when you say it. But, in many regards, I don't think we really know of all the impacts that what we're spraying at these various times have on the strength of the hive. All these companies look at their individual chemistries and isolate that, and they say, well, it doesn't have that big of an impact. but they're not also taking into account the surfactants, the multi-tank mix approaches that we've been utilizing. And I think that's kind of where the general guidelines have been. If we can avoid it, don't spray anything at bloom, and if we have to spray it when the bees aren't there, so we have a longer time for some slight degradation, that it's not sitting on that pollen. Because that's how everything gets back into the hive, is the chemicals on the grain of pollen. Pollen gets collected by the bee, gets brought back into the hive. And that's why a late afternoon spray or early evening spray is better, because most of the pollen is dehisced at that point and has been collected and is back in the hive. So to kind of give you an idea, I mean, I think you really, as you're saying, you need to work with your beekeeper to make sure what you're spraying is on something that's going to make him angry at you, because we all know the value of bees.
Well, it's twofold. The farmer wants a cheaper hive, which you're not gonna get if you spray the wrong fungicides, because the cost
Yeah,
of bees
that's right.
are enormous. So it's, but pristine, I know, I have one grower that sprays pristine. Every year for the last 3 years, that grower, we lose between 20 and 30 hives. He only takes 80. So think about that.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, no,
The other thing is
yeah.
spraying the 415 oil with Roverall or Tilt during the day. Every bee that's on that blossom never comes back. You need to spray that
Yeah.
stuff at night.
And I mean, I think there's many cases that we probably overspray some of our varieties, but it's going to be, it is very weather dependent and moisture dependent is the way we need to think about it. And I mean, you'll have people in Kern County say, "Oh, you don't need Bloomtime sprays." Well, why do you think they can say that and get away not spraying them?
Moisture.
They never have any rain. So
Paramount Farm says that all the time.
yeah, and it's, but you know, if I tell farmers in Northern Merced that, they laugh at me.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they'll say, look at an organic farmer, you're telling me he doesn't need bloom sprays? You know, so I think spray if you need, spray, you know, be judicious with the use and be conscious of what's going on in your orchard. I think that's about, I mean, at this point, we don't know what fungicide is going to be the best and safest for bees. And every time we think we find one, we find out later it's not.
Actually, there is none.
I would guess that.
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
I think it's more if you can spray late afternoon, early evening, that's where it's gonna be at. These guys that have a lot of acres and you see them spraying all day long, they're really shooting themselves in the foot.
Or their beekeeper.
Well, they're shooting themselves too, because if the pollen's wet, the bee can't move it.
Yeah.
Plus the bee dies, so, you know, if I don't know what these guys are paying. There's some talk that guys are renting hives for $200.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Okay, thanks.